Hi, you're back. Okay, this, and I haven't changed clothes. I've worn the same clothes for 3 days now. But nobody comes to my office. But I'm not sure why they don't come to my office. Ha ha ha. Okay. And hopefully, when the IT guys come back today, this will be up on Canvas and you can access it. And for my student who needs closed caption will be there. It takes a little while for all of that to go through the computer. The IT guys say that the computer has to chew on it for a while, whatever that means. So anyway, I'm hopeful, so we'll see how it works out. Okay, we're going to continue with chapter 7, and we're going to be on page 113 of the PowerPoint. Have the PowerPoint with you so that you can make notes. Feel free to write questions down and email those to me. I realize you're not going to have any opportunity to do that right now because I'm going back to back to back. But do that, and I'll certainly get back to you. And we'll have time to get through that with review and stuff like that. Okay, as I was looking for something in my notes, which I never did find, I found this, and I want to read it to you. Language development provides the basic foundation for attaching meaning to auditory stimuli. Knowledge of the sounds of the language, phonology, word meaning in the language, semantics, grammatical rules for combining sounds and words to make sentences, syntax, and guidelines for choosing how and what message to send in various social situations, pragmatics. So I just kind of liked it. Then I have something else that I want to read to you. It really touches my heart. So I think that everybody in our class is a caring person who wants to work with children, probably, maybe some adults, and who has a soft spot for when tragedy occurs or when things don't go quite right. So, and maybe some of you have heard this before, but I'm going to read it to you. Welcome to Holland. It's by Emily Pearl Kingsley. Welcome to Holland. I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands, the stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy, but there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met before. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy. And they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever, ever go away. Because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. Now, this is written to describe what happens, how someone feels when they're getting ready to have a baby, and you're excited, and you have the room painted, you have the furniture, you've had baby showers, you go to the doctor, and you hear the heartbeat, and you have the ultrasounds, and then something happens. Something goes wrong. So the trip to Italy, wonderful trip. And then you end up someplace else. And how painful it is, how it's an adjustment. It's not a bad place, but it isn't what you thought. It isn't what you planned. And if you look up Emily Pearl Kingsley, you'll get a little more information about that. And, you know, many times as I've talked to parents who, because of First Steps, many of those parents who had babies that were very sick babies, they had a baby born with Down syndrome, baby that spent measurable time in the NICU. And a lot of my parents that I worked with did not know they were having a baby with Down syndrome. As many tests as we can do and as much information as we can find out, and we can see the heart beating and to know if there's a problem with the heart, and all kinds of things. But we aren't perfect, and our machinery isn't perfect, and sometimes the end result is very different, and it's very painful. And so you just never know what's going to happen. But you spend lots of time in the NICU, lots of doctor appointments, sick baby, and it's just not what you thought. And I will also tell you, in the same vein along with that, is parents who have difficult children. I know a lady who has 2 boys, and they're both different. They're in regular public school. They talk. They are not well coordinated. They whine a lot. They cry if they don't get their way. They sometimes get aggressive. Just very, very difficult to manage. And I heard the mother say one time, you know, I love my son, but it's hard to love my son. It's difficult. Sometimes I feel guilty when I think, how can I love this? I'm so tired of this. And I will say that the parents maybe haven't been as proactive with seeking out services and trying to get some testing done and that sort of thing. When you look at them, and you've heard me say this in class, when I look at them, I go, something's just off a little bit. So sometimes parents feel I'm having a hard time loving this child. So just because it's your child doesn't mean that you don't struggle, is my whole point. And I happened to find those as I was looking for something else, so I thought that I would share some of that with you. Okay, we're going to continue. This is lecture 3, and this would coincide, as I look at my calendar, with Friday the 20th, okay? And we are talking about language from home to school, and we're talking and going to continue here a little bit with the vocabulary development. We're continuing. I'm on page 113. Okay. I ended with children using the dictionary. We have to make sure that they understand that words have different meanings and that they have to have the meaning that fits into that sentence in terms of context. We want them to make sure they know the words that they're using and they use it in context. Using existing words to help you figure out other words and looking at base words is helpful. We do that too. That's how we problem solve. We do it too. Okay. We have talked about fast mapping in the past. It helps to build vocabulary. It helps children to learn new words. Ooh, I can see that when I make a mess. Okay. We do some chunking where we're putting words into categories based on their semantic relationship. We organize them according to those features. Fruits, meat, vegetables, drinks, whatever. And we hope that we can retrieve them. But remember, I've said it over and over again, you can't separate language from cognition. They run parallel. They go together. It's like salt and pepper. They go together. Oral communication, what I'm saying, the expressive component, is the storage, the retrieval part, storage and retrieval part, and is developmental. Oral communication is developmental. Let me go back to the anatomy and physiology. The child starts out with producing vowels, a very young infant. They're making cooing sounds. As there is some maturation, the anatomy is maturing, the physiology is maturing, and they're now able to produce consonants. It's through that maturation process. Oral communication is the storage. You've got it stored someplace. In the retrieval, you've got to be able to find it. If a child has less than 50 words in their vocabulary, in their expressive vocabulary, they will probably not be able to produce many phrases, 2-word phrases. You have to have more than 50 words to be able to start stringing those words together. Now, and then you have to be able to find them. Where are they? Where have I put them up here? You have to be able to find them. Successful word finding depends on where you've stored them. Which file did you put it in? Which file do I have it in? And you've got to be able to find it. You've got to store it in an efficient way, in a meaningful way. It's like organization of a room in the bathroom, because we have all kinds of stuff in the bathroom. Toothpaste, maybe plastic cups. You may have cotton balls. You may have a face cleaner. You may have a toner. You may have an eye cream. You may have a night cream. You may have a neck cream. You may have to take your medicine. You may have your curling iron and your hair dryer there for the next day, and then you have to have your shampoo, and then you have to have your mousse or your gel or your styling lotion. You have your makeup. So if you have that stuff scattered everywhere, let's say it's in the living room, it's in the kitchen, it's in the family room, it's in the basement, it's in the car. That storage, that organization is a mess. It's a hot mess. And it's going to take you longer to find those items that you need, and you're going to be late for work. So the successful storage is important to keep you on task. And it applies to the words as well. Successful word finding depends on successful word storage. Now, excuse me, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to successfully store it the first time. You may take it out and put it someplace else. I do that when I'm working crossword puzzles, and sometimes the puzzles repeat certain words. And I think, oh golly, I can't remember what that means. Now I have to get the dictionary and look it up. And till I get to a point where I know what that means. And so I've removed it and put it with something else to help me remember it. It's the same idea. We've got to store that information in a meaningful way. Words that we use frequently are easier to retrieve. That's why in the crossword puzzle, the words that I'm retrieving frequently, I'm remembering now. When the child learns their address, they're going to put maybe the house number, the street number, the city, the state, and the zip code, because they're having them learn all of that. You're putting the zip code in the same spot as the street name. You're putting the house number in with the street name. So maybe you put everything in with the street name. It's the same idea. You've got to put it in an organized way in order to find it. And the words that you use more often are the ones that you'll remember. And that applies to being able to write them and spell them as well. When kids learn their address, their phone number, the more times they say it, repeat it, work on it, the easier it is to remember. 3 strategies used in word retrieval include semantic categorical information. How can I group these items together, these words together? Using externally provided auditory cues, including the phonological structure of words, auditory cues, phonological structures, and using visual cues. These are 3 strategies used in word retrieval. Now, it could be visual cues might be dining room table, kitchen table, end table, that sort of thing. And so visual, and it may conjure up a visual image. Could be a visual image that you see. And when we're working with kids on building vocabulary, I'll have a picture of something, and I always put the written word underneath. Now, I may not be teaching them that written word, but I put the written word underneath for exposure. I'm exposing them to the literacy. I'm not focusing on it. I might go, oh, look, there's the word table. But you're exposing them to it. The more the child knows about life and language, the more skillfully she will identify the components of the dictionary definition. That applies to everything in that child's life. The more the child knows about life and language, the more experiences they have. There are many more different places that they can put that information and align it with different situations. The more experiences they have. And as I've said, when you talk to families and you're trying to give them suggestions because they're going to ask you, well, you tell me, what can I do? How can I help him? Find out what's in your community. Find out where you can tell them to go. They don't have to go to fancy places. They don't have to have fancy toys. Go outside and dig in the dirt. Go climb a tree. Go fly a kite. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. And parents, I know, do feel guilty that they're not able to give their children certain things. I know a young man who lives from paycheck to paycheck. He goes to work. He's a good hard worker. He has a son that's hard to manage. And for Christmas, and this child is 9, he bought this child a $300 hoverboard. And I thought, oh, I wish you'd paid that money for testing on this child. He wanted his son to have what somebody else's son had. It's not that it's competition for him. I want to give my kid those things too. And I understand it. And the families that I would go visit in First Steps, and they lived in houses that were probably condemned, that had holes in the floor, and they had huge big screen TVs. They had big stereo systems, but they had holes in the floor, and they could barely make it work. So, it's what you want your child to have too. Okay, there's a little section in chapter 7 about figurative language. That's one thing I'm not really crazy about with this textbook. We talk about it in chapter 6, and then it comes up again in chapter 7, and I think it would be better to put it together all in one chapter. It's the idioms. Okay, this is what the most common, there's that phrase, the best, the greatest, the most influential, the most common. The most common form of figurative language are idioms, which is what we just talked about in a chapter or so ago. They're difficult for non-speakers because they require both knowledge and meaning. Both knowledge and meaning. There is evidence that the idioms are learned more quickly by children who have superior reading and comprehension skills. There again, children are learning the idioms. If they were talkative children, they have better language skills. They have better skills with learning the idioms and understanding them. It all just snowballs, and it all just goes like this. It just intertwines. There is evidence that idioms are learned more quickly by children who have superior reading and comprehension skills. And figurative language plays a big part in humor, the role of humor. And I think that we have to give I won't say lots of examples, but we have to give several examples. I thought I had something, hang on here with me just a sec. I thought I had something else that I could show you that I thought was kind of interesting. See, I don't have my schema in good shape. I was talking about all those things being in the bathroom and being in disarray. Well, I guess this is like my bathroom and it's in disarray. I did have something I wanted to show you that I thought was pretty good, but let me look in one more place, and if I can't find it, I'll move on. Okay. Something I like to supplement with. Oh, I think I found it. Okay. We talked about metaphors a little while ago. The hospital was a refrigerator. Okay, these are metaphorical language examples, okay? The hospital was a refrigerator. You can't interpret it literally. And somebody who is from another country would maybe interpret that. The geese are flying past my window. Might interpret it, the hospital was a refrigerator. Okay. America is a melting pot. Her lovely voice was music to my ears. Their home was a prison. He is a shining star. Time is money. These are metaphors. These are metaphors. It comes out to be something you don't expect. My kids' room is a disaster area. The computers at school are old dinosaurs. Can't you see what the kid's visualizing for that one? He is a night owl. Maria is a chicken. That would be a fun one. Yeah. But the idioms are the ones that are used most frequently. And they do play, all figurative language plays an important part in humor. Between ages 9 and 11, children really love humor. Knock-knock jokes. They like to play jokes on other people. And use language, use humor, use jokes in your classrooms to stimulate language and to stimulate interest in literacy. Okay, now we're on page 117, and we're going to talk about conversations and narratives. Conversations and narratives. Okay, the most dramatic change, there's another one of those, most dramatic change, in language development during the school years, it's how students use language to relate to others. Now, keep in mind, as these kids mature and they hit puberty, and they get into middle school, late elementary, middle school, high school, and the hormones are running rampant and emotions are all over the place. It's how they're using language to relate to others. Kids can be very manipulative. They can be very secretive. They think they know everything. We all did. You did, I did. And so they've got to adjust their language and modify it. They're going to talk differently to their friends than they do their parents. We do the same thing. I hear students sometimes walking around campus and the words, the filthy words that come out of their mouths. Oh, she's an MF. And it's like, oh my gosh, if your mother could hear you now. So we talk differently in different situations, and thank goodness, because parents might not be really appreciative of the way their children are talking. As the child works on conversations and becomes a little bit older, they learn to move conversations from one topic to a different but related topic. Remember how the kids were going to talk about things that they were interested in. That was going to be their main focus. Well, now they can shift and they can bring in something else. They might talk about a basketball game that they went to, and then they're going to compare that to the basketball game last year at a similar time. They can bring in some related topics. Then they may bring in the death of Kobe Bryant and some other things. But they're, so to speak, the horizons are broadening for sure. Okay. And by the time they're 11 or 12, they're able to even discuss more abstract topics. Now, that's the expressive component. Now remember, the receptive component is they were understanding some abstract concepts maybe, or some words that were more difficult. Now they're beginning to use them. When they begin to use them, that's the indicator that they understand them. Okay. Gender differences in conversations. This is fun. You may laugh and say, oh yeah, I do that, or I don't do that. Okay. There are differences for sure. Research shows us in the way men and women talk to their children. They talk differently to boys than to girls, vice versa. And we see language acquisition, the gender differences in language acquisition as early as the toddler years. Let me say that again. And I have to sneeze. I do not have the virus. Excuse me. Okay, it's my allergies. We do see gender differences in language acquisition as early as the toddler years. Gender differences in language acquisition as early as the toddler years. Girls begin talking earlier than boys. But that doesn't mean that boys, by the time the girls are 4, the boys have caught up. They just begin talking earlier. Boys have a higher prevalence of language impairments than girls. There are more boys who stutter than girls. We have a higher incidence, I believe, of Fragile X in boys than girls. Higher incidence of autism in boys than girls. But by the time the child is in the 1st grade, oh, I don't care about that. No. Okay. According to Tannen, who did some research in 1990 that was published, the difficulties men and women sometimes have in communicating to each other can be traced to the way the boys and girls grow up, the influence of the environment, expecting certain behaviors, expecting certain jobs that a man would do, a woman would do, expecting that girls are more fragile than boys. Boys shouldn't play with dolls and girls shouldn't play with trucks, things of like that. So there is an expectation. Boys like to play in large groups and they kind of play rough and tumble, and they like it when dad gets them down on the floor and is rough and tumble, and they like that rough play, that deep pressure kind of stuff. They want winners and losers. They argue about rules. You did it, no, I did it. They like to brag about their competition and they want to come in first. So they're very competitive. Now women, girls aren't so much. Boys like to tell stories and jokes. They're challenging one another. And sometimes they're a little aggressive. That's what we think of. We wouldn't think, it wouldn't be feminine for us to say, she's really aggressive. Or she's really strong. She can lift 300 pounds or something like that. You'd think, ooh, maybe you wouldn't. But and it's generational. It is generational. There are female bodybuilders and women who work out in the gym and who are very strong and like having their bodies in good shape. Girls, according to Tannen, on the other hand, play and communicate in small groups or pairs. They don't care if there's a winner or a loser. Now, some women would beg to differ. Some women are very, very competitive. And so they would maybe not agree with that. Taking turns and sharing is emphasized. A little bit kinder than maybe the boys are in that particular area. And girls try to manipulate the behaviors. They're manipulative, and the speech is used for interacting with others and talking about your feelings. We're talking about how we feel about things. As children grow older, the influence is no longer from parents, it's from their peers. The influence from the peers is big, big, big stuff. We see it in children who were good students. They hung out with the family. They weren't really in trouble. They didn't do wild and crazy things. And then they get to school. And then all of a sudden they're hanging out with their peers and they were caught drinking. And parents are just shocked. They're just shocked. It's that influence from the peers. During the school years, girls like relationships, whereas boys like to establish authority and independence. And we know those girls want those boyfriends. At around age 11, lots of gossip going on. Girls are pretty catty. Brenna always told me in school, those girls are just so catty. And she always said when she was pregnant, she wanted to have a boy because girls are too hard to raise. She wasn't all that difficult to raise. Her difficulty came a little bit later. Boys are more likely to maybe cuss and use coarse language, name calling, although I think girls are pretty good at name calling too. So we see those gender differences, which then, and how we treat the children, and then we begin to see the influence of the environment on that gender. Parents talk differently to their sons and their daughters. They talk differently to their sons and differently to their daughters, is what I'm trying to say. Fathers are particularly rough and tumble with the boys. They're a little more demure with the girls. They might give the boy a nickname and they might call the girl his little princess. Mothers imitate their preschool daughters more often than their sons, and they spend more time talking to their daughters. Not sure why that is. But, let me see, on page 299 in your textbook, let's see what this says. Gender differences in communication. Page 299, figure 7.3. This is what the book is sharing with us. Women face their conversational partners, whereas men are more distant. Women make eye contact more often than men. Women converse more thoroughly about topics. Men change topics more frequently. Women use fillers to indicate their attention to the speaker more often than men. Women introduce more new topics more frequently. They sustain a topic more infrequently. Women talk less than men. How many of you agree with that? And conversations are longer when men talk to other men or when men talk to women. Women interrupt less than men, and men are more likely to interrupt women than they are to interrupt men. Women are more likely to surrender their conversational turns than men, and women tend to talk openly about their relationships and feelings, whereas men prefer to talk about impersonal subjects. And I think that's true. Women, we just have to talk about it. If we talk about it, we feel better. Men kind of like to go in the cave and they don't want to talk about it. So I do think that there is differences in communication per gender. Okay, now we're moving on to some narratives. Get some of this out of the way. Okay. Let's see how we're doing here with chapter 7. Narratives, writing something down. It's obviously to share experiences. Children are asked to write about things that are important to them. They begin to learn grammar and utilize the grammar that they have learned. They are using the morphemes that they've learned, And every culture has storytelling. Now, whether they have their children write it down may be a different story, but every culture has storytelling. Children learn beginning, middle, and end of a story. They learn beginning, middle, and end of a paragraph as well, which is important. What is the opening statement for the paragraph, the body of the paragraph, and the closing statement? And the early literacy exposure also is setting the stage for these narratives that these kiddos are going to write. There are plots. In high school, some of the books that students are reading can be controversial. Some of them, if you're in an AP English class, you're maybe going to read something that wouldn't be read until college. Okay, let's see if I want to talk about that. I think I want to talk about that. I think I might stop with the narratives because the next one on page 121 is development of reading and writing metalinguistics. And that just seems to be a nice place to stop with the narratives before we begin the next chapter. Okay, IT guys are supposed to come back here in just a little bit. Hopefully this is all going to be on, I think, YouTube. But certainly somebody needs to let me know if it's not there. But I do know it takes a while for the closed caption to come up, I believe. So I'll send an email to those who have to have the closed caption and have you send me an email and let me know if it came through. Okay, I want to have Elmo. He's going to say goodbye to you. Okay, here we go.
Come on, everybody, let's do the chicken dance with Elmo. Elmo wants to be a chicken, Elmo wants to be a duck. Clap your hands for the chicken, clap your hands for the chicken. Make a sound of the chicken, make a sound of the chicken. Come on, everybody, let's do the chicken dance with Elmo. Elmo wants to be a chicken, Elmo wants to be a duck. That was fun.
Okay, guys, it's been real. And again, I hope you get what you're supposed to have here. So let me see if I can get us turned off, and I'm going to stop.